Hello, thanks for joining me. It was an angry meeting in the Saudi Arabian port of Jeddah on the 1st of August 1990, which helped to change our world. On one side of the table, Saddam Hussein's top negotiators, still hoping to persuade the oil-rich state of Kuwait to help Iraq financially. On the other, the Kuwaiti Crown Prince, Sheikh Saad al-Sabah. The Iraqis repeated their request. They'd bankrupted themselves by fighting an 8-year war against Iran and scarcely had enough money to feed the country. The Crown Prince audibly muttered to the Kuwaiti officials round him the unforgivable insult. Why don't they send their wives out onto the streets to earn money? Everyone knew what that meant. He was referring to the old story that Saddam Hussein's mother had been a prostitute. When he heard that, Saddam went ballistic. Within hours, Iraqi tanks were crossing into Kuwait. Looking back over 30 years, I now have a certain sympathy with Saddam, which I certainly never felt at the time. I saw so many of the atrocities he committed, from the gassing of the Kurds at Halabja to the victims of the torture which he ordered. I met a man who'd been briefly dipped into a bath of acid for writing a phone number on a banknote. That was regarded as an insult to Saddam, whose face was on the note. Even the torturers were so appalled by this sentence that they bravely decided not to shove him down into the acid all the way and leave him to die. They pulled him out quickly, but the scars were terrible. According to Saddam's information minister, I've told this story before, Saddam wanted to give me a visa just before the US and British invasion in 2003, so they could, as he put it, deal with me. I'd made a documentary about him, which was pretty unfavourable. But after he was captured, I sat in court day after day for weeks while Saddam was on trial for his life in 2005 and 6. At first, Saddam glared at me furiously. It was quite scary, even though, of course, he couldn't do anything to me. But maybe because I kept turning up and taking an interest, he got more friendly, and as he was led out of court after being sentenced to death, he even gave me a curt nod. And I watched as he was hanged on the 30th of December 2006. I admired his courage and dignity greatly. I'm certainly not going to defend the way he ran Iraq. He was pretty ignorant of the world and surrounded himself with yes men who knew better than to contradict him or tell him things he didn't want to hear. It simply isn't true, as some people say nowadays, that he was the creation of Britain or the US, though they were perfectly happy for him to fight his long war against the Ayatollahs in Iran. Nor is it true that the Americans tipped him the wink before he invaded Kuwait in 1990. And in 2001, it was an absolute lie put about by the administration of George W. Bush that he had anything whatever to do with the 9/11 attacks on New York or Washington. But the Bush administration wanted to show that the US was still the strongest power on earth. So it invaded Iraq in 2003, knowing that although Saddam seemed tough and dangerous, he was in fact an easy target. Britain, unlike France or Germany, threw its weight behind the Bush administration and joined in, even though there was no UN support for the war. The invasion itself was quick, but it led to a long civil war in which the Americans were lucky not to have been driven out of Iraq altogether. In 2006, I remember interviewing one of the top US generals who seemed so defeatist, I felt like shaking him and telling him to grow a pair. America was badly diminished by what happened in Iraq, and Al-Qaeda and much more ISIS grew immensely in strength as a result of the Iraq war. By 2014, ISIS captured Mosul, the third biggest city in Iraq, and ran it as its capital for 3 years. As for Britain, all the stuff from the Blair government about weapons of mass destruction, which turned out to be entirely untrue, created a cynicism about politics and politicians which is still with us to this day. And all because the Crown Prince of Kuwait, back in 1990, couldn't curb his tongue, and Saddam Hussein couldn't curb his temper. Thank you for listening. I hope to see you again soon.